Happy to be here. I'm aware that the summit is coming to a close, and I want to take a couple of things for granted in my remarks, and that is, we all care about religious freedom. We all believe that people deserve dignity and respect. And one of the challenges at a gathering like this is it's so easy to preach to the choir, right? What can we say to one another about how to improve our work? And so one of the reflections I want to offer, specifically in thinking about questions like coalition building across racial, gender, and class diversity, what I've tried to do is do a bit of an assessment about the work that we do, and think about where places that we can do better. How can we change our approach to work more effective? And then there's three pieces that I want to offer to you. One is around analysis, the second is around values, and the third is around culture shift. And I'll sort of talk through each of them briefly. What I want to say about analysis is that as a community, so often, because we're action-oriented, we sometimes skip steps. And it's understandable in a lot of cases, right? Because the urgency is so intense that we need to respond immediately. Right? People's lives are on the line, that's true. Action is more important than talking, that's true. But when we skip that step and don't come back to it, when we don't fully understand what is going on, then we're not actually able to produce long-term effective solutions. And that is a challenge that I see in this space constantly. I'm thinking about a doctor. You go to a doctor, and they check your symptoms. They understand them. They don't write a prescription without first understanding the illness. And I think, I'm a little bit biased here because I'm trained as a scholar, but I think this understanding is key to unlocking effective long-term change. So what I want to say is, when it comes to issues like racism and sexism and classism or casteism or other forms in which these hierarchies appear, we can't really address them effectively unless we understand them. So that's the first step that I want to offer you here. Similarly, if we're looking at the forces that are enabling the curbing of religious freedoms, we have to understand what these forces are, right? So one that I think we're all noticing is the rise of ethno-nationalism, religious nationalism, and how that is impinging on people's rights. Well, one of the things we can do is actually understand what are the enabling mechanisms of religious nationalism? What are the strategies? What's happening? And then we can start breaking it down. Then we can start undercutting it. And one of the things I want to offer to you based on my own study, and I think many of you will know this, but there are actually different kinds of nationalism, right? The two most prominent are religious or ethno-nationalism that we know, based on a particular identity. And then there's also civic nationalism, right? Which is something like what the United States is founded on, based on a sense of shared values. And this is where I want to start leaning into the second point around values. A sense of shared values is not just a basis on which we can have relationship across difference, it's also an entry point into relationship. It's a way to connect with someone who thinks that they have nothing in common with you. And then you say, hey, this happened to me recently, right? I was sitting in a lobby, and there were people they were talking about political views that were very different from mine. I found them really challenging. And then they started talking about their kids. And they turned to me and they said, do you have kids? And what are you worried about the future? Of course I'm worried about the future. And all of a sudden, we had a shared vested interest in the future for our kids. And we saw the world very differently. But it made a huge difference in terms of how we came to see one another, right? And it created a bridge. And so, starting from a place of values, not just as a large macro systemic, this is what our democracies should look like, but also on a very local, micro level in our relationships. Values are the places where we can find connection as human beings. The last thing I want to say is, to me, this is a radical culture shift, and this is what we need to be working towards. I look around sometimes and I think about our work and my work, and it feels so frustrating because it feels like we're doing the same thing over and over again. And I think especially this last year, I felt very discouraged because I thought I was making progress, and it feels like the world fell apart. And I'm wondering, does it even matter? Like, am I making a difference? Is it worth all this effort? And I don't know, I imagine this feeling might resonate with some of you. And I'm wondering, what will it take to have a different approach? What would a paradigm shift look like? And to me, here's what I want to offer you, and I draw this from my tradition, but I think many traditions and cultures think about the world in this way. The model for living within diversity in the Western world, and now globally, is based on a European Enlightenment approach to diversity, to tolerance, right? If we look at figures like John Locke or Voltaire, it's very much individualistic. In my tradition, and in many traditions and in many cultures, the approach is actually communal. We live in relation to one another. And I just want to sort of give you an example of this. In the founding motto for the United States is E pluribus unum, which means out of many comes one, which takes as a starting point diversity and an aspiration as unity, right? One day we will eventually get here. And now 300-something years have passed and we're still not close. What many traditions would say, including my own, is actually, what if we started differently? What if we started with one? Out of one comes many. It's the inverse approach, but then we're taking for granted our interconnection, and that's a radical paradigm shift. And I think many of us in the room would agree that this is what we're actually looking for when we're talking about shared dignity, shared humanity. And so that's something that I just sort of wanted to offer as an idea of something that could help create diverse coalition building.